Good day, everybody. I am today here with Malcolm Staves. Most of you would know him. Malcolm is the Corporate Safety and Health Director. I think that's the right title. Malcolm, you can help me out.
I've had a little bit of a promotion, and I'm now Vice President, so that's okay.
Right. Okay. Vice President of Corporate at L'Oreal, who we all know is a leading organization in the world. It's a well-known organization that does a lot of good, not only for beauty, but also in many other ways. And Malcolm and I are going to do a little chat today. We're just going to share views, share ideas, and give a little bit of an insight into what we do. So Malcolm, let's start with you. You've been working in health and safety for many, many years now, 30 years. And over this time, a lot of changes has happened. And you're based in Europe, you're based in Paris. So you have a view about safety from that part of the world. But overall, globally, what do you think, from your perspective, are the biggest changes over this period of your career?
Yeah, wow, that's an excellent question. And yeah, that's 30 years in several different companies and always working internationally. And I think if I can, Corrie, the biggest change that I've seen is from sort of health and safety driven by the health and safety professionals to a transformation within companies so that health and safety is more driven by the line management more and more, and supported by the occupational health and safety professional who also keep the expertise, but this idea that, you know, we are individually responsible for our teams, whether it be productivity, quality, etc. So that's one of the big changes that I've seen. And along that line, as that's been happening, I've seen the introduction of certain types of new methods, processes to try and keep people safer and healthier. One of those is obviously behavioral-based safety. I mean, that came in the early 2000s, or as I very often like to call it, people-based safety, just because I think it's all about putting people into the center. And I think there's also been, if I can, there's to give you several things all at one time, is this change in social pressure, expectations of employees from many years ago, when, to be very crude, people were employed because of their hands, because of their manual labor, to now more and more we're engaging people because of the brains. In the same time, society's changed, which has an impact and introduced things like, you know, well-being more and more. Now we're talking about mental health and psychological safety and things like that. So a lot of changes. And one thing that I've seen quite big in the field of occupational health and safety is it's been overshadowed a little bit by what I call the sustainability trends, the environmental sustainability trends. So when I first heard of the word of sustainability was all about people as well as the environment. It was CSR. Because of external pressure, I've seen the trend that sustainability now for a lot of people is linked only with environment. And in the world of ESG, environment, social governance, the S bit where health and safety lies has become smaller and smaller. There's a lot of outward pressure from stakeholders on the environmental part. And I actually think that's a shame, right? Because back in 2001, safety and people were in the center of sustainability. So, and so I think that they are the major changes. I could have gone on with a few more, Corrie, but I think they're the most significant ones to me. I don't know what you think about that yourself.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the corporate world, the investors in companies have started to play a bigger role in what companies respond to. And when there's a death in the company, they respond to that. But if there's no deaths, you know, the accident numbers look okay, then the investors and so on are happy. And you're right, and certainly there's a big shift towards environment. So I agree with you absolutely on that.
And I think it's a shame as well, if I can, that some of the companies that are rated being world class when it comes to sustainability and the environment, when you start to look at their health and safety statistics, it makes you wonder what sometimes those credentials and those rewards that they're getting, what it actually means, because when it comes to the people, they're having fatalities, like you've just said. You know, they're having serious accidents, yet the rating and the rankings for these stakeholders, the rating companies, for example, for the environment and ESG, they rate them up with the best. And, you know, it's not perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you can pass over to me.
Yeah, sort of going on the same thing. I mean, Corrie, I think you've been around a long time as well. 30 years-ish yourself. Do you want to put a number on it?
Yeah, about 30 years.
So sort of, you know, in your career, what would you say are the things that have influenced you the most with respect to health and safety?
So my first 10 years of my career was actually in a corporate role. I was probably the same title. I was the group risk manager for a company in South Africa called Billiton, which later merged with BHP, and they became the biggest mining company in the world. My first 10 years was spent in that, and what influenced me most profoundly was actually my first job. The very first time I exited university, I had to spend 2 years in the military in South Africa at the time. And my first job was that of a human resource manager on a platinum mine. And I thought I've seen everything in my life at that stage. I did every dirty job you can imagine at university to make money to pay for my studies. I was a welder. I worked in a sewage plant. I worked with people on a mold factory that were drugged up. Otherwise, the job couldn't be done. And I thought I'd seen everything. And then I entered this job, and the manager actually literally chased me. He was an Irishman. Literally chased me out of his office and said, "Go get yourself a blasting ticket, and then you can come and be the human resource manager if you know what people actually do on the ground." And I had to spend my first almost a year on the ground obtaining a blasting ticket as a miner. And it was a profound impact. You know, it was an environment where any move you make could be the last move you make. On that mining complex, 48,000 people, in the first year that I worked here, 26 people died on the ground. And that was a good year, I think. And I came out and I was an HR manager. And the first thing that I actually had to do was to go and deliver the news to a young family that their father, a young miner who was 28, 29 years old, died on the ground in an accident. And the encounter with these two little daughters, twins at 7 years age, really impacted me and impacted this manager that went with me. And it really made me truly understand what are the foundations of safety, why we do it. And I'll never forget that. That was the biggest impact on my life.
I could imagine, and I can relate to that, because I remember my first ever fatality in a company that I worked. The way it impacted me personally, even to this day, I remember everything. I kept asking myself, what have I missed? What have I not done right? Have I missed something? Even though it was in a totally different country, it just felt so personal. And I think when you feel for the families and whatever, and I think then you start to get safety. And I think you show people start to care. And I think part of your success is because you care, and maybe it's because of your experience as well. You know, a long time ago. But that brings me on to another thing, if I can, because I can think I'm seeing a link here. So I'm going to throw this in, and if you want to edit it out, you can edit it out afterwards, right? Talk to me about Deep Safe, because you talk a lot about Deep Safe. I'm not too sure what it is. Do you want to just explain while we're talking about it now, if you don't mind?
Yeah, well, you're right. It is linked to this, my experience in this world of extreme risk. I realized when it was like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 feet on the ground, that in that environment, there is something else that creates safety. It is not the paperwork, it is not the systems, it is not the safety management system or any of those things. It is what is in the minds and hearts of people at that front end where the risk exists. And, it's almost like years, you go after years, you look back and you start connecting dots. And that's when I started connecting these dots that I started thinking about the concept of deep safe. Literally deep in this case, but deep in the organization, deep in the systems, deep behind the whole process. If you think about, typical jobs like firefighters, when everybody runs away, they run to the risk. They run to the risk. They don't step outside and they do a risk assessment of the situation. It's all automatic, all automated. They instantly see the risks. They instantly assess the risks. They understand the risks immediately. And then they don't avoid, eliminate, go through the hierarchy of control. They actually harness the risk. They take that risk in order to do this job. And so for me, they've actually created something that's deep invisible. It's almost anti-safe. And this is the other concept that is linked to that I've developed over the years in my mind was the concept of risk competence. And risk competence is I define this as the readiness to respond to risk.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a very different definition of safety. Not the absence of events, the absence of accidents, but the systemic and cultural readiness to respond to risk. There's a famous one is Alex Honnold is the mountaineer that climbs mountains, sheer cliffs without safety equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And his actions are so precise, so detailed, so focused. And it's the same as what it was for me in that stope. Any move you make can be the last move you make. And if that's the situation, how do you make those moves? That is what I regard as absolutely deep safe in that context.
I think that makes sense as well, because I know if I take my sites throughout the world in L'Oreal, I mean, we train our people for those worst case scenarios, evacuations, etc. That's why you do fire drills, etc. Because when something's happening, you need people to react in the same way. And that's why, in my opinion, firefighters, they're constantly drilling. They have to train the automatic brain, but also have a healthy fear of what can go wrong, right? As soon as you become overconfident in a risk and an at-risk situation, then that's where you're likely, in my opinion, very often to have a risk. And the other thing, going on the same thing, Corrie, that we do, we have this idea that we don't just want people to work safely for L'Oreal. And very often people look at me as if I'm an alien, right? Well, of course you should want people to work safely for L'Oreal. And in fact, of course we do. But when people work safely for L'Oreal alone, they're just, in some respects, almost working to be a statistic, for want of an expression, or not being a statistic. What they should really do is want to work safely because they want to go home and spend time with their loved ones, their family, whether it's playing soccer, whether it's playing football or whatever, just going for a walk in the park. Then you change the equation and safety becomes personal, right? And then you give them what I call like a healthy fear of what happens when safety goes wrong.
Yes,
so I think I'm totally and utterly aligned with you on that one. And it's important to train the automatic mind so that it can, I'm going to say, react in the right way when needed. That's why we do drills. And I think, I think the fire services are a fantastic example of that in action. I think it's a great example.
Yes, it is, and I'll show you a picture behind me. This is my first workplace. This is my stope where I worked, and these people are like that. But inside of this is the culture that drives this. This is a culture that you live in and work in that just almost automate your responses in so many ways.
Yeah. I mean, it puts self-preservation on a different level because they're horrible environments to work on, health, from a health point of view, from a safety point of view. and you've got to have eyes everywhere. You've got to really be risk aware.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And I think sometimes,
that's,
I don't know what you think. Do you think sometimes, I mean, this is just out of the blue. Do you think sometimes we wrap people in cotton wool a little bit too much? We overprotect them, that they get too overconfident that the risk isn't there?
I absolutely think so. We are creating a lot of pedestrians in the workplace, and it's a lot of the time topic of my talk. If you look at organizations that had catastrophic events, in recent catastrophic events like BP in the Gulf of Mexico and famous catastrophic events, these organizations had been extremely good at protecting employees, putting everything in place. And it is a protection that actually reduces people's risk competence, and it is a culture, a cultural element, and I think to me this whole link between culture and performance is a very important one.
So I mean, going on that subject, I mean, if I can, going on to culture and performance, because I didn't mention it, but I think this focus on culture or climate, is something that's evolved over the years since I first came into health and safety. So how would you actually define culture change for yourself?
I think to be changing culture, we have to understand what culture is. And there's so many, if you open a book about culture or any academic, it is the set of shared values and attitudes in the organization and drives. To me, that's such an academic thing. For me, it is the lens with which you look at your organization. And that lens had been created by your experiences, by your organization, by your team, by the leaders that you work with, your peers, the systems that you deal. All of that starts to form the lens with which you look. And that goes back to that statement earlier on. It creates this readiness to respond to risk. And you respond in a certain way, built and defined by this culture. So how do you change it? I think the most important thing to change in any culture for me, and that's how we focus on it, is to change the actions and behaviors of the leadership in the organization, right throughout to frontline, to give them an insight into their impact on people, their impact on the perceptions of people, their visibility in the workplace. And this is not rocket science. It's very straightforward, but it's happening through the commitment of the leadership. But not only that, how do they actually change their behaviors? And there's if you think about, there's two dimensions for me in culture, and maybe I'll show you another picture on those. I love little pictures because it makes so much sense. And it is this one here, where there's two axes, and one is authority, the degree, the extent of authority that you allow people, you give, the empowerment that you give to people in your organization. And the other axis is the level of how do you value people, to what extent do you value them, high or low. And this gives me these four quadrants, where a highly valued, high authorized employee is an employee that creates space. They thrive in that environment. And at the other side, low authority, low value, that is where people are being excluded, and that's where people fail to commit themselves in the organization. So if I look at culture change, I look at this little model to know where we need to change in the organization and how to make those changes happen.
Just looking at that, if I can, I find it interesting, but you're also talking about business culture. It's not just the health and safety culture, environmental culture. That would apply to a business. And when you look at where you are with the cultures that you have, I don't know, within ethics, within operations, within HR, within diversity and inclusion, within health and safety, within the environment, etc., you could use that for any type of culture in order to identify maybe where you are and what your opportunities of improvement are. I
You're
think.
absolutely right, because they're inextricably integrated. You don't really have a safety culture or a this culture or that culture. You really have a culture in the organization, and it's something that I think is often misguided in people's thinking that, oh, we're going to change the safety culture. Well, that goes much deeper than that.
Yeah. It's almost, if you look at the business culture in itself, it's there's lots of subsets of culture,
Yeah,
because not and even then, if I look at the business culture in L'Oreal, it changes from country to country. And sometimes it can even change from department to department or site to site
absolutely.
within a country. So it becomes very, very almost personal. It's in individual ecosystems, which makes it very, very sometimes difficult to move to change. And that's why I think in our organization on culture change, we rely a lot to be driven by individual managers locally with the teams, etc. So I love that. I love that.
I think you're spot on, because we don't really have a culture. We have an aggregate of subsets of cultures, and what that
Yeah.
aggregate is difficult to understand and grasp often. But let's switch a little bit of themes. Let's think a little bit about. Let's talk a little bit about the management of risk, because it goes hand in hand with everything we said so far.
Yeah.
And I have heard people talk about, when they talk about you, they mention the word hummingbird approach, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't quite know what it is, and I'm very keen to hear what is the hummingbird approach, and how does this relate to safety and health.
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, and I'm not going to go through the entire story. I mean, people can go onto YouTube and put in the Hummingbird story, and it'll come up. But it's all about marginal gains. It's all about not trying to be perfect, not trying to go directly to the end game, but to try and make little differences, incremental differences. That if we all make a little change, then it makes something bigger. So, for example, in this particular case, if we all make a little change for safety every single day, right, together that makes a bigger change. So we can make those incremental changes and try and do marginal gains to improve aspects of what we do. And the hummingbird is the symbol that we use within L'Oreal, and it's also my hashtag. And basically, the essence of the story is that there's a forest on fire, all the animals run out, the hummingbird goes to the river and tries to put the fire out, whereas the other animals all watch. And then at the end, the animals, the large elephant says, well, what are you trying to do? You're making absolutely no impact. And the hummingbird says, well, I'm trying to do the best that I can. And if we all try and put out the fire, then maybe we can just do it, right? So it's that kind of idea. And we've embedded that into everything that we do in L'Oreal, and whether it be culture change, risk assessment, to say, let's make a little bit of a difference every single day and try and improve what we do. And it works extremely well. And on health and safety, it could be down to doing things like, we have a program called SIOs, for Safety Improvement Opportunities, which is people can identify any opportunity for improvement. They report it into the manager. The manager then works through that to the end. He doesn't delegate it to anybody else. He has to look at it himself from start to finish, which involves visible leadership with respect to his team. It also involves good communication between the team and his manager, resolving something identified by the team. And that's just one little SIO, just one little thing. It's an accident waiting to happen before a near miss, before a first aid case or anything like that. We do 75,000 of those a year in L'Oreal. We have a 90% closure rate, which is our objective. Now, that's even before there's an accident or a first aid case. And I think some of the times I think of our culture and I think about our performance, etc. And I think this little program, like the Hummingbird, right? Those little bits that we do every day, we just might have avoided 1, 2, 10, 100, or 1,000 accidents. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a fantastic, simple program, and it works extremely well. And we have other programs that are a little bit aligned like that, that work on the same principle. So
That's phenomenal. That's really fascinating. A
Yeah,
lovely
so
analogy too, but it's really you know, to me that you're so on the target there, because we don't want to manage and learn from accidents. You know, to me, that's that's way too late. And this relates to you know, this is good risk management. And is this
yep.
based on your experience? What does good risk management look like? And I'm sure this analogy and this process you have is one part of it. Are there any other things that you do that you would say this is what good risk management look like?
In my opinion, yeah, but I think you have to attack risk at all the different levels. Okay, we have a program that we call Life, right, which many companies may call SIF, as in serious injury and fatality sort of events. We call it Life, which is an acronym for life-changing incident or fatality event. But people forget the acronym; they think of life. And we've also changed the conversation around that program to killing people. We don't talk about fatal accidents. We talk about how do we avoid killing somebody in L'Oreal. And why do we use that expression? Because it has that emotional impact on people by use of that word, right? So it's shifting, changing the conversation. But also with you, instead of by using the word life instead of SIF, it doesn't matter where we are in the world, people are saying life is life. So they know what is behind the program, even without understanding the detail of the program, whether it be a marketing manager or whether it be an operations manager. And that was one of the things I've learned from working for L'Oreal, is the importance of branding to get the right effect with respect to deploying a program. Like I could have called it SIF and it wouldn't have worked the same. The other thing that we've done, which I think is really a cornerstone of everything that we do, we have what we call a safety validation program. That's based on the European requirement for what we call CE marking, certificate safety validation for equipment. We've standardized that, globalized that, and all the equipment that goes in our sites is safety validated by our EHS teams. So they look at it from when it arrives. It's like doing a risk assessment, but formalized, and we identify, is the equipment green, orange, or red? If it's red, we can't use it. Doesn't matter whether it's brand new, just being bought, or whatever. And it forces the people to think, and it visualizes safety as well. If it's orange, we turn around and say what the issues are with respect to the compliance and what we've put in place in order to mitigate the risk while we sort it out. So we have several programs like that that are geared at trying to focus on the high risk, where we can have those unthinkable, catastrophic, irreversible events, down to those kind of risk processes that involve people thinking, identifying risk, entering into conversation with the management, etc. So we create that two-way conversation to try and create a risk-seeking culture. Now, is it perfect across the world? Of course it's not. In some countries, it's more of a challenge than the other, because we operate in 140 odd countries in the world. But I think the first thing that you have to do as a company is look at how you do risk management and ask yourself, is it effective? And am I not just looking at the immediate risks, but I'm looking at those low probability catastrophic risks? And I'll just finish on this last one, Corey, just as an example, if I can. We had a major event in a Seveso site, which is a major accident and hazard site, regulated, etc. In France. Wasn't L'Oreal, it was with another company. And we looked at these regulations, and I don't know if you've heard of Seveso regulations, right?
No.
It's a major accidents and HAP. So it's those big sites like oil refineries that when things go wrong, you can have a major impact on the environment, on the local population. And it's just in Europe, in the European Union. But we then asked ourselves the question, we were humble enough to ask ourselves the question, what about if we had one of these sites located in South America, in China? So we took that European legislation about how you control these type of potentially major hazardous sites. We integrated into a L'Oreal directive, and now we've applied it worldwide. And basically saying, no matter where you are located in the world, if you were based in Europe and if you came under this European legislation for these major accidents, potentially accident sites, then we apply the same rules to you. Because just because your regulations locally are lower than that, doesn't mean we want that event to happen in a L'Oreal site. So you need to manage risk at all the different levels of the organization, but also embark your employees and your managers so that you create what I call a risk searching culture.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope it makes sense.
Yes, very much so. If you introduce the next topic, I can pretty much go on that theme, because it's very, very pertinent.
Yeah, no, I mean, you use a lot of terms about black swans, purple and orange dragons, right? And which are a little bit strange for me. I know what black swans are. I mean, everybody I think out there knows what black swans are. But what are purple and orange dragons?
It's a little bit, well, it is an analogy that is very much related to what you've just discussed. And it goes back to my career. I was a human resource manager for a while, and then I was appointed by this manager that him and I went to this fatal accident family, and he appointed me to draft a course for him, and he called it Hazard Awareness, Corrie, because it's about this. He didn't understand what, you just get me something. And so I designed this thing, and we started working on it, and I designed a very simple tool for the miners to understand, and it was called the 6Y tool. And it is it's a lens with which we look at risk. It is, risks can be overlooked. Very simple. Risks can be underestimated. Risks can be rewarded. You can take the risk because it rewards you. Risk is inherent in the task. It's inside the procedure already. The risk can be balanced by production and safety pressures. You take the production focus. Or risk can be tolerated. 6 simple things. It's like engagement with risk. And it works so well. And then something happened in this company. One of the mines, it was a gold mine, had a massive disaster, a catastrophic event, a black swan event. It was one of the mines that had the leading indicators in safety in the company. And this company had 60 odd mines, huge organization. And 177 people died. Underground smoke inhalation, a fire underground that they never thought possible. And I was taken out of my role in this human resource training function. And that's how I got my job as the group risk manager for Billiton. And I never forgot this. I got a job at a high level in the organization, reporting to the CEO, because 177 people died. And what I did after that is use this simple tool to design a critical risk search program. Every mine site, we visited them with a small team, 10, 12 people, and we just went into the workplaces and looked for catastrophic risks. And it was just so revealing. What was sitting there that we never knew was right there. And the difference between a black swan and a dragon, a purple dragon and an orange dragon, is predictability. Black swans are, you can only predict it after the event happened. You can never foresee it. And the dragon concept, designed by a French financial guy, Didier, I forgot his name now. He called it Dragon Kings. And I chased to purple dragons. But it is a focus on catastrophic risks. And I love the thing that you just mentioned earlier in your program about it's long before a near miss. And I call that a far miss. And that's the name I use for this dragon concept. That I'll give you a quick example. One mine that we visited, and I did this process for several mining companies in the past few years now. One mine we visited, there was an air intake pipe where the air for the underground operations are being sucked in with massive pumps. Right in front of the air intake of the mine, underground, was actually submerged diesel tanks for the power generation plant. Now, can you imagine that right in front of the air intake of the mine, 120 miners underground, sit the diesel tanks. If a fire starts, and they've never had an incident with that, never a near miss or nothing, until this young guy that I was with coming out of this process looked at it and asked that question. That is a purple dragon, right there.
That makes sense. And you know, one of my fears that I see more and more is EHS professionals stuck in their offices doing paperwork, risk assessments in offices and whatever. And I think our profession, just as it used to be that you've just described, it's getting out there and looking for the risk. It's getting out there on the shop floor. It's getting out there where it really matters. And honestly, I think our profession, when I look at it, it's moved a little bit sometimes. And with everything that's going on at the moment, we've forgotten, or I think sometimes we've forgotten, the importance of good risk management as a solid foundation for everything else we can do.
Yeah.
It's no good doing behavioral-based safety. It's no good maybe doing more advanced methods or whatever if your risk management approach is not solid.
Yeah, you know, and I want to show you another picture that will immediately be recognized.
Yes.
This, to me, is probably one of the most misleading concepts in safety, because we were trained by the Swiss cheese model to look for the holes in the Swiss cheese if they line up. And that is not where the problem is. The risk doesn't sit in the holes, in the failures. Risks are actually in the cheese itself. And we don't look there because we don't get data from that. And that's why I think the concept that you talked about, you know, you do 75,000 assessments basically in your organization every year. You are doing those assessments in the cheese and not in the holes. And that's why the process is so successful.
And it's also sometimes, I think, going back to what you were just saying as well about the approach to risk management, sometimes you need to ask yourself, what don't I know?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we see what we see, we react to what we see, but sometimes we have to ask ourselves the question, what don't I know? I mean, for example, if you don't understand electricity, how are you ever going to be capable of assessing a situation where electrostatic electricity is a potential problem? I mean, it's very, very difficult if you don't know the subject.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
you just don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. And you talked about the oil and gas industry north in Europe, who obviously with the Piper Alpha disaster created such a huge impact on safety in the world. Since then, what is it, the Robins report, I think it was creating that. Now, in that, there was a video made, an English guy from ICL, it was at the time, Brian Appleton, you really must know him. He facilitated this inquiry, and he said, when the Piper Alpha manager was challenged afterwards, why did you not know of all these failures and potential problems? The manager answered and said, I never got a report anything was wrong, so I thought everything was okay. And his response to that was, if you only get good news, or if you get no news in safety, you have to worry, because then you don't know. And that is so powerful.
And one of the things that we do, we try to do within L'Oréal, is we try and use new eyes, new people that come into the organization, new hires, because they see things differently. And very often you don't see things because it's always been like that. It's part of the furniture. And I think also it's important for in this risk culture that we've been talking about, is to use new people, new eyes, external people as well, that see things from with a different lens, going back to where we started earlier on. Very important, because we just don't know what we don't know.
We don't know what we don't know. That's Donald Rumsfeld's famous principle.
It's indeed.
He was a great safety risk manager. Malcolm, we are drawing close in our time.
Yeah.
I think the last topic I want to ask you about is, let's switch gears.
Yeah.
We are obviously preparing for a new future, post-COVID, post technology. What do you think the future profession, the OHS professional, would need to look like to be fit for the future or future fit? What does
Wow,
that look like?
that's $1 million question. When I look to the future, and we're working on at the moment within L'Oreal what we're calling trying to prepare our EHS professionals to be future fit. And we're saying the core is still risk management, because we can never lose focus of the fact that we don't want people to go home in a coffin, irreversible accident, the impact on the families as you described. So that's something that will remain, and we need to keep that expertise, helping the management do the right kind of things. But to do that in this new world, we need to be better coaches. We need to have better listening skills. We need to be prepared to adapt and accompany our companies in order to ensure success. Instead of saying, this is the way we're doing it and we're not going to change because this is health and safety, is say, okay, how can we adapt what we do, our methods, to accompany the companies as they go forward? More automation, ergonomics is going to become much more important. You've got well-being in there. We're going to need more listening skills, more empathy. But above all, as well, I think our profession have some of the best leaders that I've ever seen. We have to transform organizations with respect to the health and safety culture. That's what we do. We can be talking to the CEO 1 minute, senior manager another, and then we're out on the shop floor talking to people. So when it comes to adaptive leadership styles, etc., I think we've got a great profession. But I think we need to continue to home in and develop our leadership skills as well, and to be recognized not just as health and safety experts, but also as the leaders that I think our profession are. So I also think the future of the profession is more diversity and more inclusion. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. I'm a great believer, from what I've seen around me, that better decisions come from more diversity, more inclusion, because you get better input, and more diverse input of thought, and therefore as a result you can make better decisions. In our business, better decisions means we save lives. It's as simple as that, and we reduce accidents. So, you know, I think we've got a fantastic profession. I think we need to evolve with the way social media, the way society is evolving, more into well-being, mental health as well. I mean, the engineers of the past are struggling with the concept of mental health. We need to evolve. And I think that's what the future is. And I'm a great believer, for any of the professionals that are out there, I'm a great believer in continuous professional development and taking charge of your own future and saying, okay, I want to develop, I want to learn about these subjects, I want to develop my management skills, my leadership skills, etc., because I want to be there. And if we're recognized as a profession, as managers and leaders, then it opens up other opportunities for the diversification into other professions, into management, into other management, operational positions, etc. So, in a nutshell, that's what I think the future is. But looking through to, coming back to you, if I can, Corrie, at the end, for the end here. I mean, you talk about safety, capital S, capital A, capital F, capital E, capital T, capital Y. What's your why in that? I'm sorry to throw this at you. I'm going to put you in a difficult position. What's the why?
Well, it's very, very related to our discussion. The S is for loyalty, Semper Fi, the Marines slogan, or Semper Fi. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. The A is for authorized, people to be authorized in their workplaces. And the F is for fearlessness. The E is for Imagineer. We have to be imaginative, innovative in the organization. T is for tenacity, what you mentioned earlier. We have to always recreate safety. Every day we start a new day, it's a new recreation of safety. And then the Y is coming back to the original concept. Everyone in our company wears a little wristband like this that says, when was the last time you saved someone's life? And this is something that drives all of us. The passion in our whole company is driven by this. Mine is in a African language that is used underground, or was used underground. Inilo skati wena sindisile lo mpilo kalo munje madota. when was the last time you saved someone's life? And the reason mine is in this language is because obviously the whole world is just, the greatest leader in my mind that hit our modern times was Nelson Mandela. And if you Google the word Ubuntu, he explains it as, in Africa, there's an enduring value. And that value is, I live through you, you live through me. This is how Black Africans feel meaning in their lives. And to me, that is the why in safety. Why do we do this? And we often forget that safety is not about satisfying the investors, satisfying the corporate office, satisfying the safety manager on site. It is because we care and we're passionate about safety and about the next person. And that's, coming back to my STOPE, that's what I still believe drives me.
Yeah, and I think I would totally agree with you there. And I believe that you need the systems in place, you need the risk management, but we can't be there all the time watching people when they're doing the job. So somehow you've got to find that thing inside of them that gives them meaning, gives sense as to why safety.
Absolutely.
And for me, that's also part of this future as well. We have to make safety personal. And we have a program in L'Oreal that I love to bits. It's called Safe at Work, Safe at Home. It's all about exporting our safety culture into our homes, into local communities, and also into other companies if we can. And it gives a sense of purpose. When you go home and you're taking home, a fire extinguisher because you've received one as a gift at work, and you discuss that with your children, you discuss it with your wife. There's a sense of pride, but also you're spreading that culture of safety within what really matters to you, with your family, etc. So I think what you've said just resonates. It just makes so much sense. And also this idea of making safety personal, right?
Yeah.
And then it's win-win, because if I want to work safely for me so I can go and spend time with my family, then I'm going to take care of myself and the other people around me when I'm at work.
Yes.
So no, this is brilliant.
Lovely. Yeah, maybe we can finish on that note. One of my clients, a gold miner, had this most amazing safety vision statement, and it was safe enough for our family. We are going to be so safe in our underground operations that I'll take my family members in with me to work there, but also safe enough for our families. And I think that really captures, what you just said as well, in terms of we just take safety personal, and we take it home, we take it everywhere.
Then it's win-win for everybody.
This was such a lovely discussion. I really enjoyed it. I think we must do this more and do it again.
Honestly, this has been a great experience. I've loved it. I could have spoken with you for ages. We've got a ton of topics, but for me, it's a take. Thank you.
Absolutely.